Good evening and welcome. I am Golda Lee Bruce and this is the 7 o'clock news here on CNC3.
Good evening. Glad you can join us. I'm Samson Anton.
Good evening. I'm Roger Sands.
In the headlines tonight, the Integrity Commission says there was no breach in the state paying for the PM's sister's foreign travels. Section 34 of the Administration of Justice Act repealed. Piarco cases will continue.
Dr. Keith Rowley writes several governments and international agencies about the government. We'll tell you what he wants. Teachers abandon their classrooms. Tutor claims success on day one of two-day sick-out.
And in sport, Windies beaten by Sri Lanka in a T20 warm-up, but Coach Gibson says don't worry.
We begin with news tonight that the Integrity Commission says it has found no breach of the Integrity in Public Life Act involving the Prime Minister's sister, Vidwati Newton. The Commission's findings are contained in a letter dated September 12th to Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, Reynold Cooper, and which has been posted on the Facebook page of the Prime Minister. The brief letter to Mr. Cooper was signed by Commission Registrar Martin Farrell. It says that it has conducted an investigation into the alleged breach of the Act involving Ms. Newton, whose travels were financed by the Office of the Prime Minister, although she is not an employee of the state, and found no breach of the Integrity in Public Life Act by anyone in the Office of the Prime Minister. Opposition leader Dr. Keith Rowley referred the issue involving Ms. Newton's travels with the Prime Minister to the Integrity Commission in May of this year, after the government revealed that the state had spent more than $800,000 on the travel and other arrangements for the Prime Minister's sister to accompany her on overseas trips since she came into office nearly 2 years ago. Government has admitted that the post of travel assistant to the Prime Minister is not an established post created by the Cabinet. The Office of the Prime Minister has also made the letter from the Commission public. The Integrity Commission wants more legislative teeth in tackling corruption in public office and has begun a review of the Integrity in Public Life Act with a number of recommendations. The Commission wants powers of arrest, seizure and investigation, and it also wants to drastically widen the pool of persons in public life who are required to declare their finances. If the bill is passed, judges, magistrates, and even the Commission of Police will be asked to make their finances public. Kamal Georges explains.
Its vision aims for a corruption-free Trinidad and Tobago, but the Integrity Commission says the current legislative framework handicaps this goal. To achieve more success in uncovering corruption and monitoring public officials, the Ken Gordon-led commission proposes a number of drastic recommendations that will arm them with powers to crack down on white-collar crime in a serious way.
We want increased powers of search and seizure as well as arrest. There are very high-profile people on the European continent, I wouldn't call names, whose offices have been raided and documents taken away in search of possible evidence against corruption. All right? We want those same powers.
The Commission proposes it should have special powers to designate investigators similar to a police officer, authorize investigations, summon witnesses, and subpoena persons in breach of the Integrity in Public Life Act. In making a case for the recommendations, the Commission expressed concern that there appears to be no penalty for the breach of the Code of Conduct by persons in public life.
You know, people might think, well, all right, I will get charged for breaching the Code of Conduct, but nothing ain't going to happen. Right? We want to be much more firmer. If you breach the Code of Conduct, remember my earlier slide, if you have standards to adhere to, breach of these standards should involve a penalty.
Commission member Neil Rawlingson believes all persons and institutions who use public money should fall under the Act and therefore suggests a widening of the pool to include, among others, chairmen and members of all service commissions, the Transport Commissioner, the Commissioner of Police, CEOs of all state enterprises and statutory bodies, even special and technical advisors to ministers and also judges and magistrates.
Yes, we are just going by international practice, right? Judges are not excluded in other jurisdictions, and we don't see why that shouldn't be the case here.
If these amendments are approved by Parliament, the Integrity Commission will then be in a position to demand audits of entire institutions which are identified as being involved in corrupt practices as opposed to just individuals. I'm Kamal Georges reporting for CNC3 News.
And that's the story which takes us to your vote question tonight. And the question that we're asking is, do you believe increasing the powers of the Integrity Commission will make a difference in the fight against corruption? Now text your response to the number 2623. If it's yes, then text Y. If it's no, then text N. We'll give you an update on voting during the newscast and the final vote at the end of tonight's news. The Attorney General says the decision to have Section 34 of the Administration of Justice and Indictable Proceedings Bill proclaimed on August 31st was to clear a number of cases in preparation for the declaration of the entire bill early next year. The AG told the Senate that August 31st was sufficient lead time in preparation for the rest of the bill to become law. Samson Nanton has more.
Another shot at it in another place. Attorney General Anand Ramlogan seeking to convince the Senate there was no ulterior motives by the government when it sought to have the controversial Section 34 of the bill declared separate and apart from the entire thing. He says that they needed lead time to trim away some clear cases at this time before the entire bill is proclaimed next year.
Why bring that section in place first? Because you want to trim the excess fat off the backlog so that when you send, come January, when you send the backlog to the judiciary in the High Court, what they will get is the live, relevant cases that Parliament intended to deal with.
He insists
my heart is clean, my hand is clean, and my conscience is very clear in this matter.
The government's been getting a whipping as their financiers, Ishwa Galbaransing and Steve Ferguson, are the first to publicly be seen attempting to benefit from the proclamation. The AG says while constructing the legislation, they had no one in mind. But opposition Senator Faris Alwari is not buying it. He makes it clear that there was assurance given in the Senate that this bill would not be proclaimed until 2013 and now wants sanctions to be passed down.
What is the sanction or consequence for misleading the Parliament? Who is going to hold the mantle of blame?
He asks the question many have been asking over the last few days, why this one so quickly?
And the legislation was passed in the lower house after 11 o'clock last evening with the full support of all present. But opposition MP Colm Imbert argued that there were more UNC supporters who stood to benefit from the proclamation of Section 34. Here again, Samson Anton.
With a division of 35 members in favour, no abstention, none voting against, the motion for the third reading of the Administration of Justice Indictable Proceedings Amendment Bill 2012 is now approved.
A late-night decision, but one that got the full support of all members of both sides of the House. And as he wound up debate, the Attorney General was hoping the new measures would expel all doubts of nefarious intentions by the government in the first place. Justice Minister Herbert Volney, for one, is defending himself. He denies being part of any conspiracy, but he says many persons will be inconvenienced because of this move.
It is not that the Minister of Justice is in any conspiracy. Who are these people? I don't legislate for these people, for any personality. I legislate on the basis, I bring measures on the basis of legal principle.
Earlier, the opposition's Member of Parliament for Dago Martin North East, Colm Imbert, was arguing that there are more supporters of the government who stood to benefit from the proclamation.
But there are a number of UNC personalities who have matters before the court, indictable offences. It's not just the Piako accused.
He even spoke of a high-ranking official of the government whom he says only on Saturday was drinking champagne with one of the persons who applied to go free from prosecution when Section 34 was proclaimed.
Who was cavorting with accused persons who are before the court on indictable offences in a hotel in Tobago over the weekend. Saturday night. I'm not accusing him. Our word, yes, celebrating, and while the lawyers of that accused person were preparing applications us to go to the court.
After the Senate, the amendment to repeal Section 34 must be proclaimed by the President to actually take effect.
The issue of the proclamation of Section 34 of the Indictable Proceedings Act is now engaging the attention of 10 of the world's most prominent institutions and governments. Despite the retroactive repeal of the controversial clause, opposition leader Dr. Keith Rowley kept good on a promise to write a number of external bodies about the behavior of government in this matter. Kamal Georges takes a look at the contents of the letter that was sent.
Help us keep government in check was the conclusion of a 3-page letter by opposition leader Dr. Keith Rowley to President George Maxwell Richards and 9 external bodies. The United Nations, the Association of Caribbean States, the Organization of American States, CARICOM, and the embassies of the US, UK, France, Canada, and the Netherlands all made the mailing list of the opposition leader as he sought to expose the actions of government in relation to the proclamation of Section 34 of the Administration of Justice Act. Dr. Rowley explained to leaders like Secretary General of the United Nations Ban Ki-moon the events surrounding the surreptitious proclamation of the controversial clause during 50th Independence Anniversary celebrations and of its possible impact on the extradition to the United States of persons alleged to have committed offences in relation to the Piarco Airport scandal. Dr. Rowley's international expose says Trinidad and Tobago will no doubt be viewed to be a state that is complicit in the avoidance of prosecution of very serious crimes, which in this instance have international repercussions. Dr. Rowley has vowed to keep these governments and organizations informed, but he also asked that they join in causing the present government of this country to govern within the commitment of their oath of office as designed for the protection of the interests of all the people of this country. The letters were dispatched on Wednesday morning before the emergency sitting of Parliament. The opposition has not yet received any responses. For CNC3, I am Kamal Georges.
To another type of news now, we join Roger Sant. He's here to tell us what we can expect coming up in sport a little later on in our newscast. Roger.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Golda. Well, we'll tell you that the Windies had a warm-up match over in Sri Lanka today, and the scoreline not very pretty. Thankfully, it was only a warm-up match, and Coach Otis Gibson said afterwards, don't worry, the team has a lot of firepower still ready for the World T20, which starts in a couple of weeks. That and lots more still ahead on Sport. Golda and Sampson, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Roger. It's now time for me to hand you over to my esteemed colleague, Sampson Anton.
Thank you so much, Golda. Before we go on, though, the question once again that you're voting on tonight, we want to find out, do you believe that increasing the powers of the Integrity Commission would make a difference in the fight against corruption? Text your response to the number 2623. If you want to vote yes, text Y. If you want to vote no, text N. We'll give you an update as we go along. And of course, the final result comes up at the end of tonight's news. Now, just ahead on the CNC3 news, tutor claims victory as teachers abandon their classrooms. Protests at the Scarborough RC School in Tobago. Dismissed minister admits some of his constituents are worse off today than they were 2 years ago. And later, family in Waterhole Cocorite plead for help following heavy rains. This is the CNC3 News. At 7, we'll continue after this.